Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia SBDC's webinar series, Google and Beyond, Marketing and Managing on the Web. This series is designed to take a look at tools and techniques to help small businesses take their business to the next level. Today's webinar is Building Your Community, Creating Your Own Social Network. All of our Google and Beyond webinars are presented by Ray Sidney Smith, web and mobile strategist, author of So Low Mo Success, Social Media, Local and Web Small Business Marketing Strategy Explained, and president of W3 Consulting, a digital business strategy and training firm. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type those questions into the question window and Ray will do his best to answer them. Without further ado, here's Ray Sidney Smith.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to the Virginia SBDC Network for having me here on the Beyond Google Marketing and Managing on the Web series. Today we'll be talking about building your community, creating your own social network, which is really exciting for me. And just a couple of housekeeping items, as Tracy talked about. We have the question panel, so feel free to go ahead and ask questions now. That's why we're here, to be able to help you. Next is that if you have any questions after the webinar, feel free to go ahead and send me a message at W3 Consulting on Twitter, hashtag those Beyond Google, and I'll be happy to answer those questions. On the final slide, I will have my contact information so that if you do need to reach out to me and you're not a Twitter person, as I am, you can still contact me, and I'll be happy to answer questions regarding the webinar today. If you want to go ahead and follow at Virginia SBDC, Small Business Development Center, for future programs and other resources that they provide to the small businesses throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, go ahead and do that. They'll be providing lots of resources as the months and years go by. So with that out of the way, let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. And today what I'd really like to do is cover some really important functions of how to create a social network. And just to start off, we should really talk about what a social network is. I think it's really important for people to understand that. In terms of an online social network, I'm not going to get into the sociology of social networking, but what a social network service is, as we call it, an SNS, and why you would start one as a small business. I mean, that's really fundamentally important. So we'll talk about sort of why you would want to start a social network. Next, we're going to talk about the 7 steps I've created for creating a social network. The 7 steps to launch, okay? We'll talk about those. I'm going to talk about a bunch of tools that you have available to you in order to launch a social network fairly easily and then maybe not so easily. For the more technically inclined, the tech savvy, and those who would like to control the process a little bit more, have maybe a little bit more technical or technological background, you could use some of the other tools that I'll talk about at the latter portion of the webinar. And of course, throughout all of this, feel free to ask questions in the panel, and I'll be happy to answer those. So let's start off with social networks. Online social networks or social networking services have been really a fundamental part of the Internet or the World Wide Web as we know it for many, many years. So dating back to 1994, we had a platform called GeoCities. And even before that, we had online community boards and email listservs and so on and so forth. Basically, people like to connect, right? People want community, and the name of this webinar, Building Your Community, is really about that. Fundamentally, community is founded on, and I talk about this pretty, broadly and in depth in So Low Mo Success, which is the idea that, communities are founded on 3 guiding principles, 3 guiding reasons for communing, getting together, which is that we want to give things as humans, we want to get things, and we want to feel a sense of belonging for doing so. So fundamentally, community is built on giving, getting, and feeling a sense of belonging. That doesn't matter whether it's your business or whether it's your family, your church community, your spiritual community, your community group, your residential association, your civic association, whatever it is. Those are the 3 fundamental underpinnings of social networks. So going forward, we then had Tripod in 1995. GeoCities and Tripod were really the first online communities, and the Globe.com. Those sites really allowed you to be able to fundamentally connect with people around the world around particular interests. And I'll explain what a social network is very shortly. So we've had this for a very long time. And so let me provide sort of a baseline definition for social networks, and then we can go forward from there and talk about sort of some of the other history of what developed into what is now sort of commonly known as a social network. So I really think about social networks as an online platform. It's a web-based platform where people get together around a particular interest, right? And that might be a common activity that you do. So, if you're a soccer player, you might want to talk about getting together, or you might want to talk about FIFA and the upcoming World Cup. If you are a mom or dad, you might want to talk about being the best mom or best dad, or taking care of your children in a particular community or area. If you're spiritual, you might want to talk about your spiritual community and the activities that you're doing in that particular way. If you're politically oriented, you might want to talk about your civic engagement and the activities around that. And in the case of us here as business owners, we want to talk about the products or services, the industry, and the area in which we happen to be experts, in the area in which we happen to be providing those products and services to our target market, to our audiences. So usually those social networks, those online or web-based platforms, provide a couple of services. Now, it's really interesting because the business model for a social network is going to be a little bit different than other kinds of online services, in the sense that a social network, actually, you don't provide anything but the infrastructure for the most part as an external social network. I'll explain what that is in a moment. As an external social network, the people who actually consume are also the ones who create on the platform. So think about Facebook, right? Most common sort of analogy is that you go onto Facebook, you connect with your friends and family, and you put content on there, and you consume content on there with other members, other users of Facebook. Facebook doesn't actually put any content onto Facebook. Facebook just provides the platform for communication, for a user profile so that you can, present yourself, a digital identity in essence, on there. And it also gives you this sort of, every social network pretty much gives you a member directory that creates a connector of those common traits. How do I commonly bond with these other people? So to translate this for you, an external social network is like Facebook. Facebook allows you to come there to connect with people who are basically your friends and family. And now you can connect with brands, but that's not how it originally was. So you can connect based around a common interest. I want to stay in touch with my friends and family. I want to get back in touch with my friends from high school. I want to get in touch with my friends and family who might not live nearby. Whatever the reason why you connect with an external social network, for the most part, an external social network allows the vast majority of people to join that particular network. Now, switch that to an internal social network, which is actually a subset of an external social network. So I might have, a membership to Facebook where I can connect with the vast majority of Facebook users, but I might create a Facebook group for just my friends who are interested in web and mobile strategy. So I might say I want an internal social network of just my clients who would want to be able to do that. And by the way, I'm not going to be talking about Facebook groups and creating internal social networks. I'm talking about launching your own social network outside of any other platform. So we're not going to be talking about internal social networks in that sense. But I did want to give you that contrast that there is external social networks, which is what we're talking about launching today, and there's an internal social network where you can create subgroups within a social network. Okay? So if I like one particular thing, I'm going to go ahead and create that within there. So from the point of GeoCities and Tripod and the Globe.com, we then fast forward to about 1997. So 2 years forward, which is sort of an eternity in tech world, is that we had the launch of a website called 6degrees.com. Right? The 6 degrees is, separation between you and Kevin Bacon or something like that, right? But the idea here is that from 1997, we had the first real underpinnings of a social network as I've defined it. The ability to commune around common interests and having these communication abilities with people who have digital identities and who have common interests, common traits among each other. And then Friendster was launched in 2002. Fast forward a year, and we have MySpace that launches, which eventually becomes, the largest social network in 2003. 2003 also brought forth the birth of LinkedIn, the business social network. which just, by the way, bought lynda.com. So that's a really powerful purchase. And then Facebook, which now is the largest social network in the world, in 2004 launched as a project at Harvard, by his name is escaping me now, but 2004 launched Facebook, and by 2009 it was the largest social network in the world. So here we are today, where social networks are pretty much, a dominant force in people's lives, and I'll talk about that also. And so here we are. We have social networks. One big note to take into place here is that, whenever I talk about social media, I'm pretty much talking about U.S.-based social media, but when it comes to some of our clients who are import-export, based businesses who are dealing with a global base, remember that foreign dominance for external social networks is very different. So here in the U.S., yes, Facebook is dominant right now, but we have lots of different networks, from Reddit to Instagram and Pinterest and Twitter and so on and so forth. We have lots of different social networks that satisfy different interests. And overseas, we have other external social networks. In Canada, we have Nexopia. China, we have Sina Weibo, which is sort of a mixture between Facebook and Twitter. And Russia, we have vKontakte. And in South American countries like Brazil and otherwise, High5 and Orkut happen to be dominant. So really pay attention if you are planning on doing any social media, that you are thinking about the dominance of the foreign external social networks, aside from just the Facebook, or LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, and so on and so forth. There are other ones out there. Okay, so why would you want to start a social network? Okay, and this is really important to think about, because it's really important for your business to understand why you would do it in the first place. So first and foremost, Facebook, and by Facebook I mean really all the other external social networks out there, they're constantly changing, which includes their policies. Their policies are just always changing, and quite honestly, in the case of Facebook specifically, I always find their view to be very cluttered. You've got a lot going on. You've got a lot of advertising happening on the network now. They're a publicly traded company, and that requires them to put a lot of advertising in front of you. And so that creates a particular experience for me that actually has turned me off of Facebook to a large degree. So that's one reason, is just to remove all of the policy hurdles that make a user uncomfortable to share in an environment. And then the other side is creating a visually aesthetic and clean experience for your target market, your target audience. Two is controlling your web traffic. Again, going back to Solomo's success, one of the big things that I fundamentally found when I was guiding clients who were trying to get into web and mobile marketing for their businesses was that they were too busy trying to direct traffic to social media as opposed to directing traffic to their website, which is where sales happen, right? Because if you see my website where I get to tell you about my business, my product or service, or products or services, that's where the sale is going to happen. That's where you're going to be able to know that, oh, I can buy from you. Whereas on social media, it's about being social. It's about bringing me closer to your brand, but it's not about the sale necessarily. So if you're trying to bring me closer to the brand so that you can bring me closer to your website, that's the right method. The wrong method is to try and push me away from your brand and to somebody else's, like Facebook's brand, right? Because if you go to a Facebook page, you're not seeing your brand. You're seeing Facebook's brand first, your brand second, and social engagement third, which then someone has to go ahead and overcome all of those hurdles to get back to your website in order for there to be a sales mindset. So we really want to talk about controlling web traffic in the sense that if you launch a social network, people are coming to your website, right? You own and control that web traffic, which means it's that much closer to bringing people to your actual sales pages, your products or service pages, which is where we want them to go, right? We want them to be able to review and look at and get closer to understanding why, and then contact you, buy on your website directly, come into your store. We want that kind of stuff to happen. So controlling your web traffic is really important and a great vehicle if you are launching your own social network. 3 is that It protects the client's and business's brand, identity, and data. What I mean by that is that Facebook has particular policies, and again, by Facebook I mean all of the social networks. This goes for Twitter and Google Plus and all the others. They have policies that manage the terms by which you and the users engage on that platform. So there's a third party in place. So the data that you're using, the data that you're putting onto the social network, you have to be concerned about intellectual property. Your clients, your target market, the people who come to your website also have to be concerned about the identity that they position on their site. Potentially, if you have a business where identity is important to protect, where you don't want your clients to have to expose themselves to the greater world, you can actually control that with your own social network. And of course, then the data underpinning that. How much data do you share between users? What data is shared with advertisers on external social networks? Facebook to some extent shares their data with third-party software providers and with advertisers and so forth. Your clients may not want that. They may want that protection and so on and so forth. That's not all businesses, but that's definitely one of them that you should really think about. Brand exclusivity is really important for those that are trying to create sort of a luxury experience, a higher-end experience for their clients. So if you're creating a social network, what you really want to do is you want to be able to create a social network where you can say, by being a part of the social network, you are being a part of an exclusive community of people. So brand exclusivity becomes a really important factor. Yeah, you can go out there and like our Facebook page, but if you really want to get the good deals, the most important information, the best content, then you've got to join our social network. And that creates a sense of desire in your target market and your target audience to want to come and be a part of that social network. And finally, there are just so many people on social media today. The statistics, Pew basically put out that 74% of U.S. adults are on social networks, and they use social networking sites. What's really interesting, though, is that number is tempered only by a much older crowd set. So 89% saturation has happened within the 18 to 29-year-old age brackets. 30 to 49 years old, that's 82% of U.S. adults are on social networking sites. So really it's the 50-plus crowd where it drops down to about 65 to 49% for 65 and older. But those are actually the fastest growing groups of people who are actually coming onto social networks. So over time, we'll see more and more of the mature populations coming onto social networks, notwithstanding the fact that they actually are the lowest saturation yet in the U.S. market. So especially as smartphones are getting into the hands of older populations faster and more easily adopted, we're going to see more and more people doing that. And just as a breakup, so you have an idea, we have 71% of those adults who are online are on Facebook. So we have a huge saturation of that. Now that doesn't mean they're necessarily using Facebook all that much, but they happen to have a profile. Probably because an older crowd wants to connect with their grandkids and see family across the country and so on and so forth. 23% of those online adults are on Twitter. 26% use Instagram, which is primarily in the younger crowd set, so basically under 30 crowd. It's actually like 35 and under, something like that. 28%, almost a third of online users in the U.S. use Pinterest, and almost a third of online users use LinkedIn. Okay, so it's good to pay attention to this reality. I give you those numbers because if you're going to start a social network, you have to understand that there are enough people online socially networking that it can support any number of more social networks. There isn't really a number of social networks where there are too many, because people will be members of many different social networks. It's sort of like fiction reading. If you're a fiction reader, you read one particular author's novels. You don't only read that one author's novels. You read lots of authors' novels. So you're not going to say, oh, you know what, I'm not going to read so-and-so's because I read, this particular author's novel. You're going to read, if you're interested in that particular genre of novels, you're going to read all of them. You know, you're going to, not all of them, but you're going to read more than one of them. You're not going to have exclusivity to one particular social network. And that's the way that people use online social networks. They don't become a member of Facebook and say, I'm never going to become a member of anything else. They say, oh, this provides me value. I might want to become a member of that. And so people will be a member of many different online communities, including social networks. Okay? So launching a social network is a process, okay? And it's an so going back to this, you know, the idea here is that we want to be able to make sure that we are thoughtful and clear about how to actually launch our social networks, okay? So if we're going to launch a social network, we really want to think about this in a couple of different, you know, sort of ways, and one of those is really defining your purpose and outcomes from running your social network, okay? So what I mean by that is, as a business, why would you run a social network in the first place, right? Why would you want to launch a social network? Well, we already talked about the reasons why you might want to launch one in terms of wanting to get away from the Facebook brand and wanting to have your own brand forward. But the reality is that for a business, it's sales, right? Or it's a stronger brand perception. You know, maybe you have strong sales, but you want to basically keep those sales strong. Maybe you want to be able to affect a particular community to increase word-of-mouth marketing, okay? Well, how are you going to do that? So we have to really figure out how we're doing that and really define our purpose first in wanting to do it, because you can't, you know, it's important to know where you want to go before you decide that you're actually going to go ahead and go there, right? You know, it's like creating a map for yourself. And then the outcomes. What's going to be success? Define success for yourself with regard to the social network. Is it a number of users? Is it a number of engagement points? Is it how much traffic you get to your from the social network to your website? Is the website going to live on? Is the social network going to live on your website, or is it going to live off your website somewhere else and just direct traffic to your business website through maybe advertising or content that you post on the social network in order to be able to drive traffic to your website? What are you going to do? How are you going to do that? Okay, so that's sort of the thought there. It doesn't take very much thought to figure it out. You know, a social network is a social network. People come on, they join, and they post content, and then they engage with one another based on that content. Well, how do you fit into it? What's your purpose of being there, and how are you going to do that? We'll talk about that when we get to content strategy. Okay, so then there's site functionality, and that is, what do you want the site to be able to do? Okay, and this comes down, and this will flesh out more when I show you the actual tools and the functional functionalities of those particular sites. But you can go ahead and figure out, what do you want the site to do? So this is going to be the next, you want to basically make sure that you go ahead and figure out what the site can do and how you're going to figure out the interaction abilities of your audience, but also how you as an administrator of the site are going to basically go ahead and make that happen. Okay, so this is pretty simple. What do we want the site to do? Do we want to basically give people the ability to create their own blogs, for instance? Or do we want people to be able to privately message? Or do we want to not allow people to privately message on the site? There might be reasons for you wanting those people to do those things or not. Do you want the membership directory to be public? Or do you want only people who are members of the social network to be able to see that? Is the content that's posted public? Or is it all private and not allowed to be shared outside of the social network? Well, figure all of that out, and the site functionality will go ahead and match that. Next up is branding. How do you want the site to look? Do you want the site to look like your company, or do you want it to be completely something different? Do you want it to be branded so that it's about more of your industry and to appeal to a particular target market, in that way, than for it to look like your business? Okay, so some people might decide that they want that to look just like their business. They want you to feel like you're on the company website, that you're experiencing a brand that is matched and complementary to the company, as opposed to something that's completely separate from the company for maybe a feeling of what do you call it? Independence, right? You want people to feel like they're different from your website, and so you can create a different brand for them. So just, think about the branding. I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. Next up is an engagement plan. And this is where you really decide on how you're going to put content onto the site. What content are you going to put on the site? How are you going to do that? Are you going to launch, your own internal content where you regularly publish it to all of the people in the community? Are you going to have a specific page or resource section that you are consistently putting content out to? Are you going to push content into their stream from your company page or profile? Or are individuals within the company going to be creating that content as themselves on behalf of the company? Figure that all out. You have all of the options based on the site functionality, based on the tool that you're going to use. And so you want to really make sure that you go ahead and do that. Then, of course, there's an interaction strategy. What and how do you interact? So one is, outbound communications. You interact with someone. You initiate the conversation. Are you initiating interactions? And how do you respond to interactions? So you should be monitoring the interactions between, at least the public ones. If you allow private messaging, I would presume you're not going to be monitoring people's private messages. But the public interactions on the social network, you want to make sure that you go ahead and say, oh, you've said something. Do I thank you? When you make a comment, do I interact with you and engage? If I ask a question, who's responsible for responding to those questions that your audience might have? Figure all of that out. And then, of course, calls to action. As I said at the top of the list, one way in which you could do a social network is create the platform, engage your users, and then provide ads, but the ads would be all for your business. So they would be to your products or services or to your website, or maybe if you wanted to be a little bit more soft sales, they could be ads that were for a downloadable ebook content, like a downloadable ebook as content, or a checklist, or something else, resources that your company might have, and inside that download you would have maybe some sales materials. So it's all about figuring out the easiest way to create a closer and closer relationship with your target market before you ask for the sale. What are you giving to them so that there's enough of law of reciprocity, enough buy-in from them that they're going to want to actually initiate a sales relationship, a business-client relationship, as opposed to just wanting to learn more and get to know your business more. So you have to figure that out. I mean, every business is different. But you're going to have calls to action. You're going to have to, at some point, figure out how are you going to do that. Maybe that's built all into your content strategy, and maybe somewhere in your content strategy you have links to your website and to your products and services. Fine. But you have to really figure that out. Maybe you have no ads on the website, and you use all content to be able to market. You have to figure out what that appropriate mix is of advertising, potentially, content, and calls to action within that. Where's all that happening? Next up are policies. Okay, every social network is going to have a number of policies, from disclaimers to how you're using data and all of those things. Really, I would recommend that you go back to one of our prior webinars that talked about e-policies, and really, think about all the various policies that you would have regarding your business. And you pretty much have to have those policies as it relates to the social network. The really great part about that is a lot of the tools that I'll be talking about automatically generate those policies, and so you can actually just utilize the ones that are standard within the system and make any additional sort of modifications that you need to the system so that you can go ahead and upgrade those as necessary. Okay, and then next up, second to last, is finding your community. So one way in which you can find your community is what I call listening in Salomo Success, which is this idea of going out there to where communities already exist. That might be Facebook pages or Facebook groups. That might be LinkedIn groups. That might be blogs where you know that there are people reading. If there's a popular blog in your industry where you have a lot of your target market already reading and listening and engaging, right? You want to go there and you want to listen. And by listening, I mean going there and commenting as your company, or now as your social network, and letting people know that the social network exists. So it's not to be distasteful. It's to be, appropriate when someone is engaging in that particular, platform, is letting them know that you exist in sort of very like casual ways while still providing content to the particular blog. So a good example would be a blogger who's very popular in my industry posts a blog article, and below it you see a lot of people commenting on that blog. Well, that's a great opportunity for me to join in the conversation. So I'm, of course, going to create a profile, if I haven't already, that's my business or my social network, so that people see the name of my company and they see my social network's name, and then I'm going to comment in there. I'm going to join in the conversation. Maybe the blogger didn't make note of something because there's only so much energy you can put into every blog post. You want to add another point that might be pertinent to that particular blog post. And while I was mentioning it, I would say, this is something that I really want to explore more in my new social network that you might want to check out, and you provide maybe the link to it. So the idea there is just in a soft, casual way, provide value, but also let people know and expose them to the social network that you're creating. The second side is using advertising, and that might be traditional as well as digital advertising. You can put out advertising in your local community paper. You can potentially do a local terrestrial radio ad. You could also do Google Ads, a Google AdWords campaign to basically let people know that this exists and get people coming. You can of course let your entire customer base, both potential past and current customers, know that this exists so they can come and join the social network. So use all of the avenues, all the contacts and communication mechanisms available to you to spread far and wide that you exist. And then finally, the seventh step is to really measure the results and iterate. So what that means is you should be measuring everything, making sure that you have Google Analytics set up on your website as well as Google Webmaster Tools, so that you're looking at how the search engines are seeing your social network, how your users, the people who are visiting your website, are using it, any of the reports that can be put together so that you understand what's happening. And based on number one, which is basically what does success look like, look at the measurements to see if you're getting closer towards success. That might mean that you have to change your goals. That might mean you need to change how you measure. But now you're going to change. You're going to iterate. You're going to get better at the process by following that. And I think in the early days, you're going to see some data, then you're going to see more data, and usually about 6 to 9 months later, you're going to start to see things. If you've been doing the right consistent strategy, you'll start to see that threshold of really higher engagement and more people jumping on the network and the real growth happen. And at that point, you can really make some changes to increase the experience, the positive experience that people have on your social network. Okay? So in this latter half of our time, I want to actually take us over and jump into some of the tools that you can use in order to be able to create a social network. So the big ticket here is for us to go in and really look at the various tools that we have available to us in order to be able to do that. So bear with me a moment while I go ahead and hop on over to the first one. And the first one is a long-standing site called Ning. Okay, so Ning is a place where you can build a social network. And I remember way back when I had started a small nonprofit organization for young entrepreneurs, and Ning was a brand new site, and it was very different from this one, but they've come a long way. And so what Ning allows you to do is it's a fully, you sign up for a free account to start with, and you can create new ones out there, and you just launch a social network. It has all the community features and tools you need, and so we'll just go through a couple of them here. Okay, so this is a site where you just go in, you create an account, and then you launch a social network. It has forums over here, so you can see community features. There are forums and photos. You can like and share things. You can have unlimited subgroups. So in this case, you're creating your own business, brand-enabled external social network, but your target market, if it's big enough, can create their own internal social networks. Okay, that's powerful. They can create their own member profiles, have member categories, and you have the ability to go ahead and send email broadcasts. So that's really great if you need to send a message to all of the users. In essence, you're doing you're killing two birds with one stone. If you, in essence, I don't like that. It sounds murderous to kill two birds. But you're taking care of two things with one tool. There we go. But the idea here is that you are capable of going ahead and broadcasting to the entire community through Ning. So you have your email list basically built into the tool, as well as your social media engagement metrics and so on and so forth. So that's really great. You can blog. You can have multiple blogs, basically invite other members to co-publish with you. You have Facebook Discuss and other commenting tools built in. So if you're a Discuss user like I am, I don't have to worry about having to create a completely new commenting infrastructure for myself. I can totally use Discuss. And you can even use Facebook commenting, which is really amazing. You can create your own custom HTML pages. So in essence, you could literally move your entire website to Ning, create your business website on top of Ning, and then underpin the social network right there. So your blog and your social network are all built into one platform. That's really powerful. And it's pretty cheap. I think it's like $25 a month for everything. Let's see here. Yeah, so the one that would pretty much manage for most businesses is the basic here. Basic price is $25 a month. You get 1,000 members. Unless your site were to grow exponentially, I think 1,000 members is a pretty good number. And 2 administrators and unlimited everything else. You can have unlimited pages, unlimited everything else. So that's pretty good. If at the most, you're probably going to go to the $50 a month platform. If you have 10,000 members, you're doing pretty well. So I think that's a pretty good price structure. So that's Ning. I really like it for a lot of different reasons. One of them is the custom URL. So it gives you the ability to have your own URL. So it's yourbusiness.com, or it could be whatever you call your social network, but it could be called social.yourbusiness.com. And so you control that domain, and it's really important that you control the domain links. You never want to create a social network that's going to be somebody else's name.com, because what happens if they go away? What happens if you change where you want people to go at some point in the future? You want to make sure that you control that domain, okay? You can also develop your own mobile app using their API, so that's really awesome. And it's a responsive site, so you get to, whether the person's on a desktop or on their mobile devices, they all look the same here. You get a lot of different, control here that really makes it great. People who are members of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, and so on and so forth can automatically sign into the social network that you create through Ning. So you don't have to worry about, if they're a Facebook user, well, it doesn't matter. They can automatically sign in if they happen to be a Facebook user already onto your site, and therefore not have that additional barrier of another username and login and so on and so forth. So that's sometimes a benefit for some people. And you have video, integration, really good stuff here. So Ning is one tool I think that you should definitely put in your roster of options when it comes to those things. And by any means, if you have any questions, feel free to ask Tracy, and I'll be happy to answer those. Next up is another site called SocialGo. Ning is at ning.com, Ning.com. SocialGo, I believe, is a UK-based company, but they've been around a long time as well, and they have pretty much the same basic structure of, you pay us a fee, in this case $9.99 a month, and you are on the network, and you can create the social platform all for yourself. Okay? They have 2 different ones, the Go Classic and then the Go Pro, and I would presume that you would be using the Pro one because you'd want to have much more of the advanced features of the site, so you'd want to probably go with the Go plan. And you can see that it's a very basic, the whole reason why Facebook is tough for me, or many of the social networks, is it's so busy, so many different things. Well, with a SocialGo or a Ning, you can create a very streamlined experience, okay? And so the site is just clean, okay? You can see from some of the examples. Let me go down to the examples here, and you can see how clean the sites can be, so that people can just interact and engage with you and your brand, okay? So lots of really great tools here. Let's go over to the feature set. Hold on one second here. We're going to go over to the features. And again, They have all of the various tools. They have a few less features than Ning, which is why I happen to like Ning, but that's not the biggest deal. One thing that they do have is event management, which is really cool. So if you are or if you handle a lot of events, you can create, and track RSVPs and all kinds of other fun stuff. So it's really great there. Otherwise, they have pretty much all the same functionalities that Ning has, and again, you can control your domain, you can fully white label it, so it's fully yours, and they have pretty good support. What I've heard is that they have pretty good support. So you have a lot of really great options there, and again, you can turn on and off different kinds of features. And just like Ning, you have lots of multiple languages and so on and so forth. So SocialGo is definitely a great option. And again, looking at pricing, you can see here that they are at $9.99 rate under Pro, and that unlimited members, unlimited social features. And then what ends up happening is that to get the white label, fully white label, you can remove the SocialGo logo at the $29.99 rate. So for $5 more than Ning, at its lowest plan, you get to basically remove that SocialGo logo, and you can also put in your own custom HTML and so on and so forth. So a bit less of and use your own domain. So you'd have to start at the $29.99 plan from my perspective if you were going to use SocialGo at all, because again, you want to control your domain. So this would be the base level plan for you. So it's $5 more than Ning, but if you happen to like the features that it has and the way in which it does it, you might want to think about doing it. Okay, so it's SocialGo. Next up is us moving into the more technical realm. Okay, so Drupal is a content management platform, content management system, and it's a way to create a website. And they have all kinds of mechanisms for being able to create your own social network. So all of these various tools put together, that means you'd have to be technically savvy, or you would have to, have a developer who's doing this. But if you already have a Drupal website, so you have a business and you know that has a Drupal website, know that you can implement a lot of these social features just by implementing these tools on top of the website that you already have. Okay, so this is the reason why I'm bringing this up, is that these modules within Drupal can be just installed and enacted, and then all of a sudden you can actually have your own social network built into it. Okay. By the way, if you're a nonprofit organization, you're listening, Civic CRM seems to be the most popular one among them, and it's just a community management tool, and it's probably the biggest and most well known for it. But that doesn't mean that a small business couldn't use Civic CRM in the same way and create a community using Civic CRM also. I think that with a little bit of modification with a developer, which wouldn't cost very much, you could probably make Civic CRM a pretty great social network. All right, next up is, of course, WordPress. And so if you have a WordPress website, BuddyPress is a plugin that allows you to create a social network using this particular plugin. It's free, and so if you have a WordPress website, BuddyPress implemented on your website, lo and behold, you've got yourself an instant social network. Okay, and again, it allows you member profiles, activity streams. You can create user groups, and there's private messaging, all kinds of really cool stuff for you to be able to do that. Now, if you wanted to run something more like having your members have their own blog or those kinds of things, that's going to be a little bit more complicated, but nothing a developer couldn't do. So if you are planning that, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to give you some guidance in terms of where you can make that happen. But for the most part, you're looking at a all-in-one plugin. You just literally go to the plugins, add new, type in BuddyPress, click install, follow the installation process, and you've got yourself a social network built into your website if you run a WordPress website self-hosted already. Okay, really cool. All right. Next up, what do we have next? We have Plig. Okay, so many times hosting services, like W3 Consulting, we have our own web hosting service, and so we host lots of websites. And one of the services that we have the ability to auto install is this tool called Plig. And Plig allows you to be able to go ahead and create a social network on your own website. So you'd have yourbusinessname.com/social, whatever you wanted to call it, right? Whatever you're going to call your social network, it would be that particular one. Well, here you go ahead and you can just install Plig, and Plig creates a very simple, easy, social network. I like to I think of Plig as sort of like Twitter, sort of creating like a Twitter-like interface for your community. So if you want sort of a Twitter short messages, easy, sort of interface, Plig is a really good social network for that. And then let's see, which other ones do we have as well? Oh, Elg. Elg is another one of those social networks where, again, it's an open source platform. It's auto-installed through a lot of different web hosts, and so we just auto-install it for you in a directory, and then you have a particular one. And you can see that there are various organizations that have already used Elg to create their own networks, but it's a really cool item. It pretty much has all of the same basic tools, but they happen to be free. It's hosted on your site. You run it, you manage it, you have complete control over the code and everything else going on with it, and so on and so forth. So, really, really useful tool for that as well. And what was the other ones that I wanted to cover as well? Oh, yeah. So we have Oxwall. Oxwall is also an open source social networking platform, and again, if you self-host your own website, with your own hosting service that allows these auto installations, you can of course use something like Oxwall, Egg, or Plig and install your own particular social network. So lots of really great options for being able to launch your own social networks. There are just dozens and dozens, so I just wanted to pick the top ones. So these are much more, if you're developer friendly, if you're technically savvy, you can use these and really adapt them and modify them to your own uses. So really think about them from that perspective. And so I am going to have us jump back to our slides, and I've pretty much gone over the vast majority of them. I was going to talk about Diaspora a little bit. I'll do it. I'll talk about Diaspora a little bit. So Diaspora is one of those social networks that is a completely distributed flat social network. Okay, so this came out several years ago, and so in 2012 they launched this idea of having a social network that was basically the antithesis of Facebook. Okay. And today we have Ello, and Ello is trying to do sort of something a little bit different. But the idea is that who controls your data, who owns your data, and are you going to be marketed to from a social network, right? Well, Diaspora was a kind of idea, and what they basically said was this is going to be an open source social network, very similar to Elg or Plig or whatever, but we're going to allow you to be able to create decentralized social networks yourself, what they call pods, and you can create your own pods and create your own networks. Well, from my perspective, they're really complicated. So really cool tool, really great idea, but it's for someone who's very, very techy. Okay, so if you happen to be that person, and if your audience are those people, then that's fine. If your audience is a tech community and they're comfortable doing that, Diaspora could be for you. But if you're not tech savvy, this ends up being just a very, very technical and sort of many layers of hurdles to make the pods work. But they exist, and so I just wanted to make sure that you knew that they did exist, and so that's one of those things. There are a couple of other social networks that are out there that are similar to this in some way, shape, or form, but it's not really launching your own social network. So while this is a social network that's basically distributed, it's close enough to me to your own social network than to a Facebook. So I wanted to talk about it in from that perspective. So that you have just sort of the idea of that there. So I've run a little bit ahead of time, which is fine by me. But I wanted to make sure that I went ahead and answered any questions that folks had. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy, have you answer any questions that you might have, and then we can close up.
Well, Ray, so far we don't have any questions typed in the question window. So
Well,
I was going to say, so I'll go ahead and close it out. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to type them in the window as I'm talking. And if when I finish there aren't any, I guess we'll close out for today.
great.
Thanks everyone for participating. Today's webinar was recorded and it'll be posted on the Virginia SBDC website under live webinars and recordings. Tomorrow you'll be receiving a follow-up email on this webinar and there'll be an evaluation link. Please help us to continue to improve our training by taking the time to complete the evaluation. If you want to fill out the evaluation now, I am posting it in the chat window. And our next webinar will be on the second week in May, and it's Google Drive's document storage, production, and collaboration. Thank you, everyone, for participating. We do not have any questions, Ray, so we'll go ahead and close it out.
Wonderful. Take
Thanks.
care.